Yeah, so that's where we are. There's, I think, something like 20 telescopes up here, and I work with three of them in particular.
Okay.
So you can see here is one of the telescopes. Up on the hills here are some other ones. Um, this one over here, just behind the thing I'll show you, is pretty cool. This is called the Grande Telescopio Canarias, or the Big Canarian Telescope, and it's the largest optical telescope in the world right now, and it makes really amazing science. Um, so that's what's around us. But what do I do? So these telescopes here. And by the way, at any point, if you have a question or I'm going too fast, just unmute yourself. It's super informal. Um, so we have three telescopes here: one, two in the building, and three. Um, and these two telescopes here are a bit older, and they are called the Magic Telescope. Magic is an acronym. They're not actually magical, unfortunately. Uh, and basically, what these telescopes look for are gamma rays. And that sounds super sci-fi, but in reality, what gamma rays is just light, like we see with our eyes. That's even more energetic. So if you think about an orchestra, for example, you can think about how the sound that each instrument makes is very different from each other, but they're all still sound. So the light that you see with our eyes could be like violins or violas in an orchestra. And maybe the radio waves that my phone is sending out to y'all right now could be like the cellos, the really low bass waves. And the gamma rays that we observe would be like the flutes or the piccolos, really, really high pitched, high energy, um, but still light. So let me give you another view of the telescope here. Um, so basically, you might have heard that gamma rays can be dangerous, really energetic. Maybe they cause cancer, all these things. But in reality, our Earth is actually really good at protecting us from gamma rays that come from outer space. Um, as soon as they hit our atmosphere, they break up, and and so the gamma rays themselves never actually reach the surface of the Earth. So a good question might be, how do we actually use telescopes to see gamma rays if they don't reach the Earth? Um, and this is what I think is one of the coolest parts about our telescopes is, like I said, when a gamma ray hits the atmosphere stops it and it breaks up and disperses the energy and protects us. But what these telescopes actually look for are these kind of showers of stuff that come down after the gamma ray hits the atmosphere. So we're not actually seeing the light itself, but the chaos that it creates once it hits the atmosphere and creates this kind of chain reaction. And I think that's really, really cool that these telescopes, you see them as these big monolithic things that are observed in space, but they rely on the atmosphere itself as the most part of the telescope. So I find that fascinating to think about. Here's a view of the telescope from straight on, one of the two magic telescopes. And in diameter, it's 17 meters across, so about 55 feet across, and tall as well. So we're talking about like a 5-story telescope here. And this one over here that I haven't mentioned yet is the one I'm currently working with on this trip. And this is a prototype of basically the next version of the magic telescopes. And right now it has the very creative name of LST, which stands for Large Size Telescope. um, so basically, this telescope is even bigger than the magic telescope. It's 23 meters across, or 75 feet. So we're talking about an 8-story tall telescope here. And you can imagine this thing rotates and it points up. So when it's observing things directly up, it just looks massive. It's really, really cool. Um, So I gave you some stuff. We observe gamma rays, but what are we actually looking for with these telescopes? And so, as I mentioned before, gamma rays are really, really energetic. So they're like the flutes and the piccolos of the orchestra of light. But what that means is that because they take so much energy, it means that we need something really, really energetic in the universe to create them. It's really, really difficult to create them on Earth. We can, but it takes a lot of energy. What's cool is there are things in the universe that are explosive, or, yeah, usually explosive, of that make gamma rays. And so those are the kinds of things that we're looking for. So, for example, a supernova explosion, when a star dies and implodes and releases a bunch of its guts into the atmosphere, as well as gamma rays. Or when two black holes meet in a fatal encounter and smash together, these release gamma rays, as well as the black holes at the center of galaxies that are eating all the stuff around them. These release. So we're really looking for super energetic or explosive events in the universe. So about half the time, we're looking for objects that we know are always making it. Monitor them, check on them, see what's going on. Are they hungry today? Or are they not? And the other half of what we do, which is really exciting, is look for explosive events. So maybe a satellite will see a flash in the sky somewhere, and they'll send out an alert to every telescope that's interested. And if we get one of these alerts, we quickly point towards where this object is and see if we can also detect some gamma rays from whatever explosion has been seen. So that's the super base level introduction. And if you have some questions, feel free to ask them in the general chat. We'll take a little break from talking. You guys can ask away or just pop on your voice and let me know if you have any questions about the science, if you want me to explain something more. And then after, I can talk a bit about the day-to-day life here.
That's a really hard question to
It's not
unpack.
about it's not about genius. It's about being a huge nerd.
He's a huge nerd, and he's as wonderful as you've come to know him. That's who he's been his entire life. So there you go.
Oh.
Need to watch some video. All right, so I will just give you some other views in the telescope of the telescope.
What's the most
blabber away.
biggest thing you have ever watched, or the coolest thing?
So I'll get a bit closer to the large size telescope so y'all can see how giant it is. And in the meantime, a bit about the daily life here. So generally, what happens is we wake up 4 p.m. more or less, and we have breakfast p.m. and we get ready to start working. And these days, because it's summer, we're near the solstice, the days are pretty long, so it's a bit more relaxed. We come to the telescopes around 8 p.m. at local time or 7 p.m. Universal time, and we start warming up the telescopes. They need about an hour to get warm and ready to observe. And then we observe until 7 a.m. more or less. And 7 a.m. local time. And then we go to bed at 8 a.m.
Oh. I do have a question actually.
Yeah.
I never considered the fact that telescopes would need like an hour to warm up. I hadn't even considered the fact they would need warmed up.
So
That's,
tell me. Was that the
I
question?
know it was more just I don't know if I'd say an observation, but I'd never considered it.
Yeah, so the reason why these telescopes in particular need to warm up is up here at the end of this structure is the camera, which is currently just being rested on this tower. And so the light comes in from the sky, hits the mirrors, and gets focused into the camera all the way at the end.
Yeah.
And so the part of the telescope that needs to warm up is actually the camera. Um,
Right.
and basically, the idea is that it needs to be a stable temperature. It's less about the exact temperature, as far as I know, and more about that we want it to be at a stable temperature so that throughout the night, when we take observations, we can kind of ignore the effects of the camera temperature in our data. That's the best explanation I have for it.
No, that was great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so this thing is pretty massive. It's like 200 hexagonal mirrors here. They all have to work in unison, and they all can actually move individually to help focus the light towards the camera at the end. Let me see if I can go. Are you guys seeing me vertical or horizontal?
Vertical.
No, I haven't. Okay, yeah, I have no idea how to rotate.
Vertical.
Get a bit closer here. I was almost going to bring a banana for scale, but a human is probably like.
We have some questions. We have some questions in chat.
Thank you, Kristen. All right. So, what's the coolest thing you've ever observed? The coolest thing I've ever observed personally while I was here was before I
Let's.
mentioned that sometimes we get an alert about an explosion that happens somewhere in the sky. And when we manage to detect these explosions with gamma rays, we call them gamma ray bursts. And so once when I was working at the Magic telescopes, we got an alarm. It was a lot of fun to watch the data come. Oh my gosh, we're detecting it. So yeah, I think that's pretty exciting. But also one kind of target that we observe a lot, what are called galaxies with active nuclei, which basically the nucleus of the galaxy is the black hole, and active means that it's busy munching on stuff around in its surroundings. So we're talking about black holes with disks of stuff that are falling into it all the time and releasing radiation, including gamma. So I think those are really cool to think about whenever we're observing one of those. I'm always just sitting there going, dang, there's a black hole out there eating stuff. We're just checking out what's going on now, millions or billions of years later. So then, does it matter if there are clouds or not? Absolutely. Unfortunately, there are clouds sometimes. And in those cases, we still try to observe, but generally, it's when the clouds are thick, you can't actually use the data at all. We have a device at the Magic telescopes. Let me see if you can see it from here. It's this little dome right here. And this is a giant laser that we're always shooting into the sky. And this laser actually can tell us information about how thick the clouds are, what altitude they're at. So when someone a few days later, a few months later is analyzing the data, they can look at what the LiDAR was saying at the exact second of each piece of data that came in, and they can use that information to say, oh, maybe it was too cloudy this hour, I won't use it, but an hour later it was clear. So we actually have a pretty good idea of what the clouds are doing at any given moment. See another question here. What is the furthest we can observe with it? That's a great question, and I'm not sure I have an answer. In theory, we can observe as far as we want. And the question is just whether or not there's a gamma ray source that's bright enough. Yeah, that's bright enough that we can see it from far away. But I'm trying to think what's the furthest thing we've managed to observe. And I don't actually know the answer for that. I mean, I can tell you that for sure we can go up to billions of light years, which is pretty exciting. But that's in a very rare case where there's something really important. And I will double check that and correct myself later.
I start there, Gerard. You said you could see billions of light years, but it was only on special occasions. I didn't hear what the special occasion was. Sorry.
No worries. These special occasions would be when there's something really expensive and really, like for example, a supernova, two black holes
Okay.
together, things like this. But again,
They
I
cut
have
out
to
again previously, but I assume you mean high energy events.
exactly
Yeah, got you. Thank you.
one-off explosive events. But again, I have to double check on that, and I can give you some exact numbers. So Blaze is asking, does the telescope only look at things far away, or can we use it to observe near Earth objects and stuff within the solar system? That's a really great question. Within our solar system itself, the only non-man-made gamma ray source that we have is the sun. Nothing else, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you think of it, nothing else in our solar system produces gamma rays. And the sun is a really, really interesting gamma ray source. But unfortunately, these telescopes aren't designed to observe the sun or work during the day. So we don't actually observe anything within our solar system. If you say fortunately, I agree. But we do observe other things in our galaxy. So there are actually quite a number of gamma ray sources in our galaxy. And one that I think is really, really cool. You can Google it now and look at the picture. It's called the Crab Nebula, and it's the leftover remnant from a supernova that exploded. This leftover bit of a supernova is even years and I think thousands of years later, maybe hundreds actually. I'm not sure when it exploded, but I think it's a supernova that within recorded human history. Anyone is already on Google, you can. But anyway, so tell me.
Can you observe both pulsars and quasars? And if you've seen both, which one is more interesting to look at to you?
That's a really good question. Pulsars are, if you don't know, are also a remnant of a supernova. And basically what's left over is this core of the star that's rotating really, really fast. It's pretty cool because they rotate at a very precise rate, almost like a metronome. So, for example, we have pulsars in our galaxy. And in fact, at the center of the Crab Nebula is a pulsar itself. So the answer is yes, we are observing pulsars. The gamma rays don't have such a precise rhythm to them. But what is really cool about the Crab Nebula is it's always bright. So whenever we want to see, is our telescope working okay? we want to get some kind of benchmark. We say, okay, let's observe the Crab Nebula for a few hours and see what's going on. And also, if it's cloudy, they'll say, oh, just observe the Crab Nebula because maybe you'll still be able to get something. And so that's an example of a pulsar. A quasar is actually a type of galaxy. So something that's really far away from our galaxy. And it's an example of this type of galactic nucleus that I mentioned before. The black hole at the center is eating stuff around it and swallowing all this matter that's falling into it and releasing tons and tons of high energy radiation. And a quasar just so happens to be what's the word? A type of this active galactic nucleus, and we can observe them as well. I think they're both super cool to observe. I don't know if I could pick one that's cooler. I think it's mind blowing to think about that a pulsar is spinning so regularly, but maybe it's cooler to think about as a black hole observing what it's eating. So that's kind of a non-answer to your favorite question. And yeah, just to close the loop on the James's question from before, so we don't observe stuff in the solar system, but we observe stuff in the galaxy and beyond. And no, we don't observe sunspots, unfortunately. If we opened the camera during the day, it would burn. So we're not allowed to do that. Let's see. Could you detect if an event is caused artificially, like from another life form? Absolutely. We don't purposefully look for this stuff. Also, because in general, with gamma rays, because they're so high energy, it takes a lot of effort to make them. And if you want to make so many that are bright enough for another civilization to detect fly across the galaxy, it would take a lot of effort. But yeah, in theory, if there were a civilization emitting signals in gamma rays, we could detect them with these telescopes if the signal that they were emitting is strong. So yeah, in theory, there could potentially be SETI or search for extraterrestrial life with these telescopes. But yeah, just due to the impracticality of making gamma rays, it's not one of the major focuses. But there are people that are interested in that, and I think it's pretty cool. So weak pulsars, I think, is a standard candle you need to measure because they. Okay, yeah. So James is saying that when I mentioned pulsars as having a metronome, that we can use them as a standard candle because of how accurate they are keeping time. And it's true. I mean, they are spinning these giant objects, the cores of dead stars seem to be spinning at rates that are so precise that it's extremely predictable. But the rate of spinning is extremely predictable. So you can check back now, you can check back in a year, and it's still just ticking extremely precisely. And some of these things are spinning so fast. We're talking about something that's tens or hundreds of kilometers across, and that can be spinning tens of times a second. So pulsars are really, really interesting object. How fast do gamma rays travel? So gamma rays, as I mentioned before, are just another wavelength of light. So using the orchestra example again, radio waves are and cellos and visible light that we see with our eyes are like violins, and microwaves that we use to heat up our food would be like I don't know, like a clarinet or something, and gamma rays are like the flutes and the piccolos. And so I bring that analogy back to say that all those instruments are making sounds or making music, but it's all still sound. And so the same thing is with gamma rays. Gamma rays are just like the light we see with our eyes, but a different frequency. So all that is to say that gamma rays travel at the speed of light, um, just like the visible light that we look at every day. Have you ever detected or discovered something new that has never been seen before? That's a really good question. And yes, I mentioned before that that's one of the things that we try to observe are to follow up these explosions. And so actually the magic telescopes, not the one behind me, but these two guys here, were the first telescopes to detect a gamma ray burst in the tera electron volt range. And basically what that means is it's like, imagine if you took a piccolo in the orchestra and sped it up 100 times or something. So we're talking about still gamma rays, but gamma rays that are extremely, extremely, extremely energetic. And so that was one of the really exciting discoveries that these telescopes have made, was to see an explosion in not just high energy gamma rays, but what's called very high energy gamma rays. That's super exciting. If anyone's interested, oops, lost the camera for a sec. If anyone's interested, I can send you some information about that event. Let's see. Buck asks, the constant speed, does it work similar to metronomes in the sense that they were off sync, multiple sync up, they cause each other to eventually sync up? I think I understand your question. So you're talking about if there are multiple pulsars that are rotating at constant speeds, would they have some effect on each other or not? Correct me if I'm wrong. But in general, the base of a pulsar is a dead star, which means however many years before it existed, there was a giant explosion of a star, and this core was left. And basically, what that means is that anything else that was nearby no longer exists anymore because there was a supernova explosion that just got rid of everything. So, in general, there aren't going to be multiple pulsars close enough that they would be able to affect each other in any way. But even then, the spin that they have is just based on the energy that's left over from the explosion. So they wouldn't necessarily sync up or affect each other in any way if they did happen to be nearby. Let me know if I answered the question correctly or if I understood it right. How much data is the telescope processing a night? Is it like terabytes? Yes, it's terabytes. It's hundreds of terabytes every night. So we have a really, really good internet connection up here, and tons of storage that are processing the data, storing it, and making it accessible to the scientists the next morning. Yeah, unfortunately, where we sleep, the Wi-Fi doesn't work as well, but the wired connection is awesome. And yeah, I'm not sure exactly how much data is being taken, but I think with like every hour we're taking terabytes, tens of terabytes, minimum. That's a lower limit. How were the telescopes built? Is there something special about the location? That's a really, really good question. And yeah, so the reason the telescopes are here is both scientific and political. There are a few spots in the Northern Hemisphere that are considered among the best for observing. And among those are here, the Canary Islands. There's this island, La Palma, and another island, Tenerife, that have high altitude locations with extremely dark and clear skies. In addition, in the west, there is Arizona. So there's some very clear high altitude deserts in Arizona that are really good for observing, as well as the volcanoes in Hawaii. Those three places are kind of considered, the holy grails for observing these days, and the Magic telescopes, entirely funded by European institutions. So it made the most sense, I think, for them to also build it in Spain, which is why they're here and not in Hawaii, for example. And so the next generation of these types of telescopes that are being built, for which the large size telescope is a prototype, in the next 5 to 10 years, here in this spot, there's going to be, well, let me turn around so you can see them. We're going to build 3 more of these, all in the surrounding areas, plus ideally 9 medium-sized telescopes, which will be slightly smaller than the Magic ones behind me. So up here in this spot, we're going to have, 13 telescopes plus the Magic telescopes, all looking huge and glorious like this. But because this next generation is a global project, we're also going to build ideally something like 70 more telescopes in the southern hemisphere, in the Atacama Desert in Chile, which is the place to observe in the southern hemisphere. There's already a number of really, really impressive telescopes observing there. And so we're going to be contributing to that with the next generation and build, hopefully, if all the funding is secured, a 70 telescope array down there, in addition to the 15 up here. Let's see, just checking the questions. There's a lot of space rubble in the atmosphere. Do the mirrors from the telescope are working less when there's too much space rubble and debris? That's also a really good question. There is a lot of junk in our atmosphere, most of which is left over from human contamination and not properly ridding of old satellites. Generally, we just let them die up there and break into pieces. And so the good news is that the space rubble that we have up there, sometimes called space junk, is small enough that it doesn't interfere at all with our observation. Generally, our biggest concern are clouds, which are big compared to the telescopes here. And also, unfortunately, volcanic activity. There is a volcano just on the other side of here, and 1,000 meters, that erupted late last year. And it unfortunately destroyed some of the local communities nearby, and also meant that there were no observations due to ash and light. But yeah, now it's inactive again. The communities are starting to rebuild. So less space rubble and space debris and space junk, and more clouds and angry Earth explosions. Those are our biggest concerns. Will these new telescopes be working together to get a bigger picture, or will they all work? That's a really great question, and the answer is they'll be working together. So a lot of the time, all 70 of the telescopes down there and all the ones up here will be observing the same thing at once, which will be really, really cool and will allow us to look even deeper and detect things that are even fainter than we've been able to so far. It's really going to be the next generation of gamma ray astronomy. Blaze asks, how many people sleep there at the base at a time? So working on these 3 telescopes here, we're generally about 10 people at a time, somewhere 4 to 5 for Magic and 4 to 5 for LST. This allows us to always have 2 people working together, so you're never alone and getting sleepy, and gives someone else the ability to have a night off, and someone else takes cooking duty. And so yeah, in general, in our crew here, there's about 8 to 10 people. But with all the telescopes together, I don't know an exact number, but generally for the other telescopes, there's just 1 or 2 people working for 3 or 4 nights, and then they switch. And they also have their own lodging, either inside the telescope or next to the telescope. But if I had to guess, there's probably during the night somewhere between 30 and 40 people up at the observatory. But also during the day, all the telescopes have people that actually live on the island and keep them during the day if there was a problem or they need something fixed or replaced. Bugfast says, I heard space junk is 95% due to kids letting go of balloons. That is 100%. We need a Stop Balloons campaign. Did I already discover Dexoworld? Unfortunately not. Dexoworlds do not emit gamma ray radiation. So with these telescopes, we have not discovered any Dexoworlds. We should name a galaxy that's unnamed. That's a great idea. A lot of galaxies just are named these days when they're discovered. They're the telescope that discovers them, or the survey instrument that's always looking around trying to find new stuff that's discovered them. So yeah, a lot of sources just have names like SDSS10395. So yeah, we could definitely. I mean, I don't think we have enough power to make it official, but we could definitely have a galaxy naming contest or something. Vanway Galaxy wouldn't count as an entry. In the meantime, I'm going to start walking around a little bit more. If anyone else has any questions, please let me know. But I'm on dinner duty tonight, actually. In about 15 minutes, I'm going to start cooking. See, as I walk back, maybe I can give you guys some different viewpoints. What am I making? I think probably I'm gonna make fried rice, maybe. People seemed interested. I asked around. Seems like it was gonna be a hit. So no pasta. I made pasta last night. I made ragu last night, and it was really good. I would make pasta again, to be honest, but we ran out. So I'm doing rice, which I guess we'll just pretend is pasta for tonight. So, yes. Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So I mean, besides the fact that I guess half of it is my thesis is going to be mostly about analyzing data from these telescopes,
Okay.
and it really helps to have a full understanding of how they work, and actually having to come here and sit all night, deal with the issues, and fix them one by one, and talk to the experts that have
Okay.
built them themselves and gain that insight.
So you need to go to
Really,
work in 50 minutes, I
really
hear.
helps to understand when you're analyzing the data, because maybe you're analyzing the data and you say, oh, I see that the value for clouds was 0.7. What does that mean? I don't know. Should I use this data? But if you were here and you looked at the values of every night, it gives you a better idea of how to do your job because you know the instrument and its intricacies. And the other thing is just I feel really lucky because these other telescopes they then hire people specifically to operate them, and I'm lucky that with these telescopes they allow students to go and work on them because it gives me as an astronomer an opportunity A to see some of the and B to just constantly be reminded every night okay, what's working for. I get into my room and I look up and you see the Milky Way just streaming across the sky, and you go, "Oh, okay, that's really cool." So it's lucky that I get to be reminded at least a couple times a year of that childhood excitement that you get when you look up at the sky. So yeah, half of it is scientific, and half of it is just let's say motivational. The sign for our little driveway, helicopter pad in case of an emergency. Here again is the big Canarian telescope. This here is the Telescopio Nazionale Galileo, which is an Italian telescope. And over here, this dome all the way at the top, I think this is the highest altitude telescope on the site, is the Nordic Optical Telescope, which is funded by the 4 Nordic countries together. And give you a view down the mountain a bit. This is the residence where, if you need somewhere to sleep, you sleep. So that's where I sleep every night. It's about a 10-minute walk from the telescope. And yeah, you get really, really nice sunsets from there. I'll make sure to take a picture tonight. See, any other questions here? When can we visit? Whenever you want. During the daytime, it's open to visitors every day. You can drive around, really you can get pretty close to most of the telescopes, close enough to take some good pictures. Yeah, otherwise, if anyone wants, a guided tour from me next time I'm here, when I get my next shift assigned, I'll let everyone know. And especially if you're in Europe, it's not too far. Yeah, we can plan a tour one day. It's also not a bad place for a vacation. It's warm at the beaches here. Fortunately, I'm not awake in the daytime to enjoy that. That has to be a separate trip for me, I guess. Looks pretty amazing. Yeah, it really is. It's super special just to be able to stop sitting in front of a computer all day and looking at data, and to sit in front of a computer next to a telescope all day. No, but really, it's super special. Looks perfect for a low-key horror movie, Too Quiet. Yeah, I've thought about that too many times. That car is the magic shifters getting ready to go warm up the cameras. So yeah, I think probably I will end it here as I go back into my room. But in about 5 minutes, I'll hop back on in case anyone has any last minute questions. And then I'll change and go to my dinner duty. So yeah, feel free to hang out. And if anyone is still here in 5 minutes, I will answer any leftover questions. Otherwise, I hope you have an awesome morning, evening, night. Thanks, Master. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Jared. This was awesome.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Please do. You all are invited. If I'm here, I will hopefully show you around. If you're not here, we'll find someone to show you around. You're welcome, guys. I hope you had fun, and if y'all are interested in doing a more specific science lecture where I actually show detailed pictures about what's
Perfect.
happening, what's going on,
Thank you so much,
we can do
Jared.
that. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Chris. All right. I will check back in a few minutes to answer any remaining questions. And see
Okay.
everyone later. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.